Good evening, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Benjamin Johnson. I'm the event coordinator for McNally Robinson Booksellers here in Saskatoon. This event is being held on Treaty 6 territory, which is the land of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. As we listen to our speakers share their words today, may we recognize the Indigenous stories that have been shared on this land since time immemorial. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Saskatoon launch of issues number 34 and 35 of the Saskatoon History Review, written and compiled by the members of our very own Saskatoon Heritage Society. Thank you so much to our speakers for being here this evening and for working with us to make this event happen. Just to note that this event is being live streamed, so please be aware of the webcam off to our right. I'd also like to take this time to encourage you to silence your phones for the duration of the event. If you would like to buy a copy of the Saskatoon History Review, you can find them on the desk by where you came in, through that big stack right over there. Without further ado, let me introduce Jeff O'Brien, our host for this evening. Jeff was born in Saskatoon and raised in, clap in a second. Jeff was born in Saskatoon and raised in Regina, where he received an undergraduate degree in Canadian history. He earned a master's degree in archival studies from the University of British Columbia and has served as the City of Saskatoon archivist since 1997. He is the co-author of Saskatoon, a history in photographs, pardon me. Jeff believes in bringing history out of the archives and into the community. Everyone, please give him a warm welcome.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for having me here today. And what a lovely crowd here in the travel alcove at historic McNally Robinson, Saskatoon. My name is Jeff O'Brien. I am the City of Saskatoon Archivist. It says it here, so I have to say it. And it's my great pleasure to be your host tonight for the launch of volume 34-35 of the Saskatoon History Review. Published by the Saskatoon Heritage Society, the Saskatoon History Review first hit the newsstands in 1980. With follow-up editions in 1981 and 1985. In 1988, the late Bill Sargent proposed that it be published annually henceforth, with himself as the editor. And the rest, as they say, is history. The review is a rarity in Canada, one of only a handful of historical journals specifically focused on a single municipality. And since the Provincial Archive stopped publishing Saskatchewan history some years ago, it is the only historical journal in our province. That makes it a considerable accomplishment, and one of which we should be proud. Contributors over the years have come from all walks of life and all age groups, from people in their 20s to their 80s. They are academics and archaeologists, archivists and librarians, local historians, and just regular folks, people with a tale to tell. All of them bound by a love of Saskatoon and a belief that it's important to document its history and tell its stories. We have a very robust local history community here in Saskatoon, and it's in a large part because of the encouragement and support provided by the Saskatoon History Review over all these years. Let me say this again. There is no other publication, digital or print, that fills this role in the way that this magazine does. And it's clear that much of our history would never have been researched or recorded if it didn't exist. By buying a copy or making a donation, you help ensure that this work carries on. And of course, we wouldn't be here tonight without two people, Peggy Sargent and Linda Dietz. There is an amazing amount of work that goes into putting these things together, and these are the people that do it. Linda Dietz was born in Saskatoon and studied in Canada, Germany, and the Netherlands. From 1983 to 1998, she worked as a research assistant for Bill Sargent, including helping put together some of the early issues of the magazine. From 1998 until 2014, she worked for the University of Saskatchewan Department of History, where, as managing editor of the Canadian Journal of History, she learned how to do layout on the computer, rather than cutting and pasting and assembling a photo-ready copy to send to the printers. She's had several articles published in the review over the years. Since 2015, she's been doing the layout for the magazine and has been co-editor since 2019. Linda, where are you, Linda? Come stand up for a second. Let everybody get a look at you. Give us a smile and a wave. A big hand, everybody. Thank you, Linda. Now, next we have Peggy Sargent. In addition to being co-editor with Linda of the review, Peggy is very much the face and the voice of local history in Saskatoon. Since her arrival here in 1972, she has spent countless hours advocating for the preservation of our built heritage and raising awareness of our history. She's a founding member of the Saskatoon Heritage Society and a current board member, and has sat on numerous other boards and committees over the years. She's received several awards in recognition of her heritage work, including the Lieutenant Governor's Award of the Heritage Canada Foundation, now known as the National Trust for Canada, the Meewasin Conservation Award, and most recently, the Queen's Platinum Jubilee Medal in 2023. Peggy, can I get you to stand up too? How about a hand, everybody? Peggy Sargent. And Peggy, since you're already standing, why don't you come up here and tell us about this year's issue? Ladies and gentlemen, Peggy Sargent.
Welcome, everybody. It's so wonderful to see so many people here and to talk to you about the new issue of History Review, Saskatoon History Review. We have to say that without our authors, this, of course, would not exist as a magazine. So we really appreciate everybody who has contributed to the magazine so far. So I'm here, I have two hats. I'm here speaking on behalf of the Saskatoon Heritage Society and also as co-editor of the review. So we're very proud of this. 34, 35 issues. I mean, I think that's pretty good going myself for a group of volunteers. In fact, I think it's fantastic. And thank you, Jeff, for giving such a nice introduction to this this journal. We have a range of articles this evening, which we're going to present to you, talk about. We have a couple of agricultural engineers who have written about the 1925 fire, which apparently decimated the engineering building. I had absolutely no idea of this, nothing at all. So they present their findings as to what the cause was for this fire. Some terrific photos, actually, of the fire of the buildings. I mean, I just looked at them, I thought, my goodness me, just rubble. Anyway, so that's one of the articles, and that's really worth reading. It's all about, it's a bit of a mystery, and they are working at how to determine what was the cause of that fire. Then we have Andrew Wallace, architect, who used to work for the university, who talks about the life and unfortunate death, I guess, of the Lutheran Theological Seminary. Andrew will talk about, will introduce that article and talk about the history of the building, the history of the people who used to live there, actually. And then we have an article by Jeff himself about searching for the forever home for the Saskatoon City Archives. So I think this is a really happy piece for the review. And so I think Jeff will be very happy to talk about his forever home for all this stuff and for all our stuff, actually. The stuff there belongs to us all, and Jeff has been paramount in presenting the history of our city to everybody. Then Brock Silversides, whose family lived here. I think there may still be family here, I am not sure, but Brock now lives in Edmonton, outside Edmonton. And unfortunately, he can't be here this evening, but he is really enthusiastic about archival media, pictures, films, any media. any visual media he is just passionate about. And here he tells us about Canada's first televised surgery. Did you know that Saskatoon was the first place that showed a televised surgery? So this is a first for Saskatoon. Did you know that? I did not know that. So a really wonderful collection, just very varied, something for everybody. So enjoy the rest of the evening. People will introduce the different articles and talk about it and why they actually wanted to talk about it. So to Jeff, thank you.
Thank you. So what happens is the people who aren't here, they send me something and I read it. So what I'm going to try to do is read it in different voices, and maybe like I'll hunch over a little bit. And I'm not going to do that. Okay, but I will be anyway. I'm going to stop talking now. So our first authors are Professor Charles Maule and Dr. Kevin Shook, who asked the historical question, what caused the 1925 engineering building fire at the University of Saskatchewan? Born and raised in Saskatoon, Kevin Shook graduated from the University of Saskatchewan College of Engineering in 1984, later obtaining his PhD in 1995. After that, he worked as a flood forecaster in Alberta until 2007. Do you know they had such a thing? Before returning to the U of S as the SGI Canada Research Fellow at the Centre for Hydrology. In 2023, he left full-time work at the university to start K.R. Shook Consulting, primarily working on prairie hydrology for clients in government, academia, and the private sector. Nowadays, he's living in Southern Ontario with his wife Helen and one apparently very bad dog named Susie. Charles Stewart was a professor of agricultural engineering at the University of Saskatchewan, focusing primarily on soil and water conservation. As retired professor emeritus of civil, geological, and environmental engineering in 2015. Since then, he's been happily pursuing woodwork in his garage during summers and, as the garage is unheated, historical research in the winter. Now, unfortunately, neither Kevin nor Charles could be with us tonight, but they have sent us an introduction to their piece, which I'm going to read right now. During the early morning of Friday, March 13th, 1925, an intense fire destroyed the engineering building, the largest building on campus. Now, fortunately, no one was hurt. The cause of the fire was never known. It wasn't until 75 years later that an article in on-campus news about a German biplane that had been stored in the building questioned whether the biplane could have been the cause of the fire. As previous members of the Department of Agricultural Engineering, we were surprised to learn about the presence of the plane and that it could have been the cause. Why was there a plane there? Could there have been another fire source? Not until COVID did we have time to discuss these questions and pursue the challenge of solving the origins of the biplane and the fire. We reviewed the university and governmental archives for details on the engineering building and the biplane, and we also searched Saskatoon newspapers from the 1920s to understand common fire causes. The biplane was a Fokker D7, one of many sent to you have to be very careful when you're pronouncing that word. One of many sent to Canada after the First World War as trophies, as it was considered to be the best German fighter of the war. The Canadian government gave 6 of them to universities for the purpose of stimulating aeronautic teaching and research. At the University of Saskatchewan, the biplane had been hanging from the 25-foot ceiling of the tractor lab since 1921. In the course of our investigations, we discovered that there was a second biplane, a Curtiss Canuck, suspended beside the Fokker. Knowledge of this had been lost since the fire. In his report, the night watchman, Dave McKay, observed that the start of the fire was near a biplane. The fire was in the northwest part of the tractor lab, he wrote. Lower floor, blazing from floor upwards, which I thought, near as I could judge, was from the end of the counter to the corner, right under the airplane. The building was completely destroyed. In January of 1926, a new engineering building opened using the same architectural plans in its design as the original one, but with improved fire safety features. Parts of this building still stand, almost totally immersed by newer additions. So the article goes on to discuss the potential causes of the fire at some length, including the airplanes that were hanging from the ceiling, the tractors that were stored there, an oil stove, the building's electrical system, and general carelessness like tobacco use, that kind of thing, and also arson. And the authors analyze each of them in detail, and then lay out their conclusions of what they felt the probable cause was. And because these guys are engineers, and because their job is to provide answers, the original draft of the notes that I have just read included those conclusions. But because I am not an engineer, and because my job tonight is to sell magazines, I'm not going to tell you what they said. You are just going to have to buy a copy and find out. So our next author is Andrew Wallace, writing about the architecture and life of the Lutheran Theological Seminary building on campus. Andrew is a principal architect with Wallace Kruger Architects in Saskatoon. He has 29 years experience in architectural practice, working primarily in the areas of education facilities planning, heritage conservation, and adaptive reuse. He graduated from the UBC School of Architecture in 1997 and also holds a BA in history from McGill. He served for 5 years as Associate Director of Planning at the University of Saskatchewan, where he led the development of the U of S Heritage Register, a comprehensive study of the historical and architectural significance of heritage buildings at the university, which also constituted the university's policy document on heritage conservation. He's a former councillor and past president of the Saskatchewan Association of Architects, served for 5 years on the Municipal Heritage Advisory Committee, and currently serves with the Canadian Architectural Certification Board as an accreditation reviewer for schools of architecture across Canada. May I introduce Andrew Wallace.
Thank you very much, Jeff, and thank you, Peggy, for both of those introductions. Today, I'd like to speak a little bit about the context within which I wrote this article on the Lutheran Theological Seminary at the University of Saskatchewan, and also the context within which that work of architecture was destroyed. And it was a significant work of architecture, in my opinion, one of the best buildings ever constructed in the province of Saskatchewan. Peggy approached me in April 2025 to write an article about the Lutheran Seminary. At the time, this remarkable complex of 3 buildings by esteemed Saskatoon architect John Holliday Scott, who's sitting over there in the back, was empty, having been vacated by the Lutherans some 5 years before that. And it was threatened with demolition by the university. However, at the time it was still standing, and I was still hopeful that there was some chance of saving it. The intent of the article was not to protest the planned demolition. Various other protests were happening in parallel, but simply to articulate why this group of buildings was so valuable. By July of that year, before my article was finished, the university had started that demolition. So although it's written in the present tense, the article is now a record of what was lost. My association with the seminary really dates from 2011. I was aware of the building. I had walked around it and looked at it before that, but that's when I documented it along with Megan Kruger, at the time Megan Fritzler. I documented it for the University of Saskatchewan Heritage Register. That year, I was working as Associate Director of Planning for the U of S. The Board of Governors at that time was interested in developing a policy around heritage preservation. They charged Colin Tennant, the university architect at the time, to develop one, and he handed me the job. And so I hired a summer student, Megan Fritzler, now Megan Kruger, to help me. She was doing a Master of Architecture degree at the University of Calgary. And together, over the next 3 summers, we developed the University of Saskatchewan Heritage Register, which was published in September 2013. The Heritage Register is a comprehensive study of the historical and architectural significance of heritage buildings at the university. And initially, it also constituted the university's policy on architectural heritage conservation. It identified heritage assets at the university, both buildings and landscapes, and designated them according to two categories, an A list and a B list. The A list, 18 of the most significant heritage buildings, were required to be treated in accordance with the Parks Canada standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada. And if you don't know what that is, it's a standard that has become the standard for heritage conservation projects in Canada. For the B list buildings and landscapes, which numbered 16, it was recommended, although not required, that those standards be followed. The idea was that the university could manage its own heritage conservation policy independent of the three existing heritage designations in Canada: municipal, provincial, and federal. The Heritage Register was the first of its kind for any university in Canada. And for work on the Heritage Register, the U of S was awarded a Lieutenant Governor's Heritage Award in 2017. However, I see now, in retrospect, that the idea of the Heritage Register was significantly flawed in that it was predicated on the assumption that the university would always have the technical expertise to responsibly manage its heritage properties, and perhaps more importantly, the will to do so. In light of recent events, I can only conclude that both of those assumptions was false. When Colin Tennant left the employment of the university, the position of university architect was also retired. The first time since the 1930s that that position had not existed. In fact, today, the University of Saskatchewan no longer employs any architect on staff in any position. In September 2020, the U of S put out a call for proposals to find buyers to remove the seed barn and the poultry science building from campus, to be listed heritage buildings in the Heritage Register. When that RFP yielded no results, both of those buildings were demolished. In 2022, the university developed and adopted a new policy document called Heritage Stewardship Process and Principles. It's a quick read, a very slim 2-page document that lays out a list of principles intended to govern the university's approach to heritage conservation. It references the Heritage Register, but crucially redefines its role, changing the register from a policy document to a resource to be used in, quote, making decisions about investment in and removal of heritage buildings. This new heritage policy is also careful to point out the various difficulties and constraints that might be encountered in trying to conserve heritage buildings, like building code considerations, hazardous materials, remediation, and cost. It concludes with the statement, quote, the removal of buildings that have no use will continue to be necessary in order to prioritize resources on facilities that are serving the academic mission. I have to say, I've never encountered before a heritage stewardship policy that so enthusiastically contemplates the demolition of heritage buildings. In fact, the university's heritage policy document, doesn't even identify heritage conservation as a goal, not even an aspirational one. So in this context, maybe it's not surprising that the Lutheran Seminary, an A-listed heritage asset on the university's own register, was demolished. That demolition followed a hurried process to solicit alternate uses, entered into grudgingly and only after considerable public backlash. The process contained conditions virtually assured to make it fail and can only be described as disingenuous. The demolition proceeded despite several credible proposals for alternate uses, and most of the reasons given by the university for its decision to demolish the building were demonstrably false. The university's current heritage conservation approach is obviously failing. That's obvious. They keep tearing down heritage buildings. Meanwhile, the stone barn, that symbol of the university's founding vision as a university incorporating an agricultural college, is disintegrating before our eyes. Something needs to change. Maybe it's time for the city of Saskatoon to make the university's heritage buildings designated municipal heritage properties and bring them under the protection of the city's heritage bylaws. It's apparent that the University of Saskatchewan can no longer be trusted as a steward of these heritage buildings, which after all belong to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. All right. Our next piece is entitled Canada's First Televised Surgery, and it was written by Brock Silversides. Originally from Saskatoon, Brock is now an Edmonton-based archival consultant and monetary appraiser of cultural policy. He has worked for the Saskatoon Public Library's Local History Room, the National Library of Canada, the Provincial Archives of Alberta, the Saskatchewan Archives Board, and the Medicine Hat Museum and Gallery. He was the founding director of Media Commons at the University of Toronto from 2003 until his retirement in 2021. He has taught the management of audiovisual archives at Ryerson University, now Toronto Metropolitan, the University of Alberta, and for 13 years at the University of Toronto. He's the author of many journal articles and 13 published books and exhibition catalogs. Now, unfortunately, Brock isn't able to join us tonight, but he sent me the script of his remarks, which I am happy to read on his behalf. Good evening to all attendees and fellow authors, he writes. I regret I could not be here for this launch. It would have been nice to see old friends, perhaps make fun of Jeff, and mix in with a few people who, like me, think Saskatoon's history is far more interesting than is generally acknowledged. However, my wife is dealing with health issues right now, and my presence is required at home. My article is the one on Canada's first televised surgery, a slightly unusual subject, but as a media archivist, although now retired, one that I found fascinating. In short, it is an account of this country's very first demonstration of the use of television in medical procedures. This groundbreaking event took place in June of 1949 and involved 6 Saskatoon surgeons. The actual operations were shot in the operating room of City Hospital and then beamed from a radio dish atop the hospital over to the Besborough Hotel. There they were viewed by delegates to the Canadian Medical Association annual general meeting over 3 days. Like many of my articles, this one had a long gestation period, decades to be honest. It first germinated while I was a staff member at the local history room way back in the 1980s. I worked on and spent a huge amount of time with the Leonard Hilliard photographic collection. It is still one of the finest collections of historical images of Saskatoon, its scenery and events, industries and businesses, people and activities. One day, if I can find an interested publisher, I would love to write a fully illustrated book about his long and fascinating career. In that collection was a large docket of negatives and file prints, all pertaining to the Canadian Medical Association Conference in 1949. Many of them showed different surgical operations, some things you do not see a lot of in archival holdings. They were visually compelling, and not too gruesome, and I really wanted to know their context. And then some of the names of the people kicked in. For example, Dr. Baltzan. I used to deliver prescriptions, he writes, to both Dr. Baltzans when I was a delivery guy at Cumberland Pharmacy during my university years. And then there was Dr. Frederick Waite. I got to know him quite well as a senior citizen and visited him in his condo next to the Sheraton Cavalier. He was not only a great storyteller, but an extremely talented photographer as well. I managed to convince him to donate a group of his negatives to the local history room. Sadly, we never had a talk about his part in this conference. I gradually became very interested in medical photography. I uncovered some glass plate negatives, the first x-rays ever taken in Edmonton when I was working at the Provincial Archives of Alberta. I later curated an exhibition of 20th century medical imaging at the Medicine Hat Museum in 2002, and several times have been asked to appraise the monetary value of 16mm medical film. These all expanded my interest in every era and type of imaging. And I realized that these Hilliard photos reflected a bigger story than that one conference, a story from the beginnings of television in Canada and, of course, Canadian medical history. So when I had time from my busy archival life, I slowly kept finding reference material relating to this event in newspaper files and in professional journals from the period. And then one day it seemed like the time to finish it. But back to the article. When you read it, I hope that the key takeaways from it will be that our Saskatoon was the location of the very first surgery ever televised in Canada. To be sure, it was narrowcast as opposed to broadcast, but it was a technical achievement that deservedly put City Hospital and a number of talented Saskatoon surgeons on the medical map. It's an interesting tale of synergy, a cooperative effort between the Canadian Medical Association, Squibb Pharmaceutical of Montreal, City Hospital, the Vesborough Hotel, and the RCA Corporation of New York City. And despite the participation of corporations, the television demonstration was actually done solely for the public good. And that this event was not an attention-getting gimmick nor a publicity stunt, but rather the beginning of an invaluable pedagogical tool. All the delegates, participants, and the writers covering the event clearly saw immediately the immense potential of television for the teaching of medical students, not to mention ongoing professional development for practicing surgeons. I thought the story was significant and deserved to be put down for posterity, and I hope you do too. And in closing, a big thank you to Peggy and Linda for birthing yet another great issue of the Saskatoon Historical Review and for including my article in it. And I want to say something that he doesn't say in his notes here, but that he talks about in the article. Back in the day, medical students learning surgery sat in great big lecture theaters, and they looked down and they watched live surgery happening on a stage in front of them that nobody could actually see with any kind of clarity. This televising these surgeries in 1949, everybody watching went, "Oh my God, this is how we teach surgery now," right? Because you could do anything. Anyway, he talks all about it in the article. It's marvelous. And the pictures are great. Anyway, so thank you, Brock, for your marvelous piece. Okay, so our final reader tonight is me. And yes, like has already been said, born in Saskatoon, raised in Regina. I did an undergraduate degree in Canadian history. John, I loved the Ad Hum building. Just so you know, this is one of John Holliday Scott back here. The Ad Hum building at U of R is one of his. Although I don't know if anybody here is familiar with the Ad Hum at the U of R, but the traditional and historic orange shag carpet in the pit has been replaced by something else, which is an absolute abomination, but that's okay. Anyway, I did an undergraduate degree in Canadian history there. I did a master's in archival studies at UBC, and I've been the City of Saskatoon archivist since 1997, which is a plum of a job, let me tell you, not least because it means I get to do stuff like this. So, as some of you may have heard, in 2024, the City Archives, after 40 years of bouncing from pillar to post, as they say, finally moved into a permanent space in the old post office building downtown across from City Hall. Okay, so the old post office building, you know the one I mean. It's been a city building since 2014. And then at the city, they call it CSE, which stands for Civic Square East. I think CSE is a stupid name. It's totally boring. It completely ignores all the historical antecedents. So whenever I get a chance to, I refer to it as the old post office building. Okay, and so I'm hoping that will catch on. Anyway, so this idea of a permanent home in the archives has been a goal of mine since I was first hired. So it's a major milestone, both for my institution and also for my career. So I'm going to read you a little bit from my article on the history of the City Archives. And in doing this, I've misunderstood the purpose of this event completely, because everybody else has been talking about their article and about how it came to be and what it means. And I'm just going to read you part of it. Sorry. But I edited to make it sound better. So. In 1977, City Council struck a municipal archives committee in order to get control of some of the nearly 13,000 cubic feet of civic records that were at that time jammed into closets, basements, and filing cabinets all across the corporation. Okay, so when I wrote that, I immediately went to see how many Olympic-sized swimming pools that was, because that's how we measure things nowadays. And it turns out to be actually only a very small fraction of the cubic feet in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. So I'm a little disappointed in that. Anyway, but it's still 13,000 cubic feet of records is is literally 13,000 boxes of records. That's quite a pile of stuff, jammed into closets, basements, blah, 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 across the corporation. But the city clerk, John Kolinchuk, felt that the money would be better spent developing a citywide file classification system and a program of records management. Now, once that was done and all the records in the city's possession identified and dealt with, perhaps then, he suggested, the remaining archival records could be donated to the provincial archives, become their problem. So the question of what to do about archives at the city of Saskatoon was pushed off yet again and may never have been adequately solved except for two guys, University of Saskatchewan archivist Stan Hansen and professor of English Don Kerr, who planned to write a comprehensive history of Saskatoon to be published as part of the city's centennial in 1982. So in 1979, they approached the city about using civic records up to 1930 for their research. And these would be sent to the Saskatoon office of the Provincial Archives, the Saskatchewan Archives Board, as it was called then, or SAB, which would undertake a preliminary cataloging of the material so they could use it. And this is exactly what happened. In 1985, the city's Corporate Information Services Department, CIS, which oversaw the records management program, formally contracted with SAB to manage its archival records. There would be a dedicated city archivist, an SAB employee, and new records would be transferred regularly as per the relevant disposition schedules. That's a very hard phrase to say. This was exactly the same arrangement that had worked so well for the city of Regina. And for the first few years, it seemed to be working very well for us too. But money was tight in 1991, and facing a difficult budget, CIS decided to suspend the contract for a year. I was horrified, the city clerk at the time, Janice Mann, recalls when I asked her about it. Once you've taken something out of the budget, it's pretty well impossible to get it back in. But shortly after that, as it happened, CIS approached her about city clerks perhaps taking over responsibility for the archives. And this made sense, since most of the records in the collection came from the city clerk's department. Stakeholder meetings were held to determine how the program would function, and in May of 1992, the city clerk's office moved the records out of SAB, storing them off-site at a commercial record center. The initial plan was that researchers would use the finding aids prepared by SAB to request whatever boxes they wanted, which would then be couriered to City Hall, the whole process to be managed by staff at the city clerk's office. But access under this system was slow, it was cumbersome, and it was awkward. Moreover, without an archivist on staff, no new records could be cataloged. Except for the original donation to SAB, there was no effective way to access the city's archival records going forward. That fall, City Clerk Janice Mann argued that in order to meet its obligations to the public, the city needed to hire a professional archivist on a half-time contract and reinstate the archives program. And fortunately, City Council agreed. And at a meeting on October 13th, a budget was approved for 1993. That summer, Liz Diamond, previously the acting director at the Diefenbaker Center, was hired to manage the archives. Space was found at the city stores building, the old Saskatoon Cartage warehouse at 24th and Ontario, where she set to work moving the archive from the record center. Over the next few years, all the archival records stored at the record center would be moved there. Diamond left Saskatoon and was followed by Eric Anderson in 1994 and Jeff O'Brien, that's me, in 1997. By then, the archivist contract was up to 4/5 time. Finally, on January 1st, 1999, the city archivist became a permanent full-time position within the city clerk's office. This was a huge and critical step forward, not least because it meant that I no longer had to work overtime to make up for taking days off. Also, that's how I met my wife. So that's 2 pluses right there. And so a funny thing about that, as I understand it, the city solicitor's office wrote to Janice and said, look, that guy you've got working at the archives, that's not a contract position. So either you hire him full time or you get rid of him. And she decided to keep me. So that's good. Yeah, that first year I had to actually put away a bunch of my money for GST, but I met Kathy that year. So instead of putting in a GST, I bought her an engagement ring. And so she ended up having to pay for her own engagement ring. Sorry, Kathy. Anyway, the article carries on from there, of course, talking about our various adventures over the year, including the move itself, which was a nightmare. Oh, hi, Sarah. Which was fun, was really, my boss is sitting back there. I was in physio for weeks, months after the goddamn move, so we're never doing that again. Anyway, so we had all sorts of adventures over the next years up until now, but I'm going to tell you something. If you want to read about those parts, you have to buy the magazine. So listen, I just want to add that the name Don Kerr, of course, is familiar to everybody here, I'm sure, for his long association with heritage in Saskatoon and with the Saskatoon History Review. Stan Hansen, maybe a little bit less so. Stan passed away quite unexpectedly in 2001, left a very large hole in the archival community. For years, I had Stan's last email to me in my inbox. He was a wonderful mentor for a very young archivist. It's been hard to believe it's been 25 years. Their book, Saskatoon, the First Half Century, was completed on time and unveiled with great fanfare in 1982. You've probably seen it. It's comprehensive, fantastically detailed, and beautifully written. It remains widely available to this day and is the single most valuable work on the history of Saskatoon's first 50 years. So that is it for our readings for this evening. And thank you to all of our writers for their time and effort and for their contributions to local history. And do we have some time?
Yeah, we have lots of time.
Okay, we have lots of time. So if we want to have a Q&A, we can do it right now. And I'm sorry, all you people out there in Cyberland, it's only the people here who get to ask questions. But so we have some time left. So if you have a question, I have a microphone. I have a question, Andrew.
Yeah.
You said that the last university architect was the position hasn't been filled. Has there always been a university architect?
The first university architect was Gentil Verbecki in the 1930s, who was also on faculty. But before that, there was the two architects, Brown and Valance, who designed all of the early buildings at the university, who were kind of de facto university architects. They were a private firm of architects out of Montreal, but because they had a hand in every building and the original university master plan, they kind of were like university architects.
Okay, you know, I had a lady call me just a few years ago with a bunch of architectural drawings from a guy named Verbecki. Has to be the same guy. Stuff from the 1890s, from when he was a student. Beautiful things, absolutely beautiful. Anyway, anybody else? Questions or comments?
Well, are any of those biplanes still around?
Oh no, the biplanes that were in the fire in 1925 were destroyed.
Yeah, but no, like the other ones.
Oh.
that were sent.
Oh, I don't know because they didn't come here. So,
yeah.
but okay. So what happens is after the First World War, the Allied governments became the proud possessors of all sorts of German war material. And so what they did was any city, any municipality who wanted something just had to apply, and they would send you, cannons. And we have a letter some guy wrote to City Council saying that he was sending us a machine gun. So I don't know whether it ever arrived. But so for a lot of years, there were two small German field pieces sitting in front of the old City Hall building. The original plan was to create a park in like a little corner of Kinsman Park where what's his name is now, Hugh Cairns, right where Hugh Cairns is, and set up all these guns facing across the river, which, it's like you thought Nutana and Saskatoon had a bad relationship before that. Anyway, so they didn't do that, but we did get a few of these things, and all sorts of places got them. And so this is the same process for these airplanes. What happens with the cannons was that in the Second World War, we donated them to be melted down to made into munitions, so that we would send them back to the Germans, right? It was a big tall left finger for our new adversaries. Anyway, but I didn't know about the airplanes until I read that article on campus. Anybody else? Yes, hang on a second. In my microphone and coming to you.
How are you?
Thank you.
I'm just interested in designating our historic buildings at the university. I'm wondering why it hasn't happened and who could do it. And it would save our buildings, definitely.
Andrew, I think this sounds like a question for you.
Unfortunately, I think it's a question for a lawyer. In that, I believe that there are provisions in the University of Saskatchewan Act that might prevent the city of Saskatoon applying its heritage bylaw to the university without the university's consent. So my suggestion is a little bit tongue in cheek, but I think, yeah, you'll have to break out the pitchforks.
Our historical sites. Universities, education, and that is part of our knowledge, and education is just part of our parcel of being in Saskatoon. I don't know.
Couldn't agree more.
Like that.
Well, I think so too. And so I think probably the answer is that public pressure is really the only key, the only tool that we have in our possession to kind of try to force that. It's something that, and I don't do built heritage as a thing specifically, right? But they all overlap. And my line is always, you can't keep all of them, but you have to keep some of them. And that's what this process is all about, right? Is picking the ones that have to be kept.
This is not a simple problem because you got the relationship between the affiliated colleges and the university. And you get St. Andrew's College and others that are affiliates of the university. And for the university to assume liability for the maintenance of their property, etc., I think goes beyond the affiliation arrangement they had. So if you're going to preserve those buildings, it would have to be in conjunction with the United Church, the Lutheran Church, etc., so that they, in fact, were part of that endowment. But if I was president of the university and you told me I'm going to have to replace the affiliates' buildings, then I wouldn't allow affiliation beyond the campus. And that association has been good because it's kept the image of the university's ability to address the various publics that it's responsible for. But it isn't a simple thing about the university doing it. Those were affiliated colleges, and the contract of affiliation also would have some association with this. Anyway, just an observation.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else? Okay, well, thanks again for coming tonight. Oh, I'm sorry.
I do have an online question, actually.
Oh my God.
Chat.
I don't know. I said we weren't going to.
I know.
Okay, wait, how's my hair? All right, go ahead.
The question is it possible? Oh, sorry, thank you. Is it possible to donate items to the archives, and what is the process if so?
Oh, okay. Well, my particular archives is the City of Saskatoon Archives, and we do most of our collection is the records of the corporation of the City of Saskatoon. But we do acquire and have acquired some fairly significant private collections because our larger mandate is to document and preserve the memory of the community of Saskatoon. And in this, us and the local history room work together, sometimes don't work together. But anyway, so the process is you would email me at city.archives@saskatoon.ca. Let me know what you've got. There are issues that we have with acquiring records is one of space and capacity. So there are collections we've been offered that we would have loved to have had, but there's no way we could have accepted because we are not physically able to take them. But the other thing that we can do, now you got my email address, is suggest other institutions that might be a better fit. The provincial archives, the university archives, the local history room. It's certainly something we can talk about. So if you've got something you think the archive should have, you let me know. Yes.
First time I saw you was on CTV. You look as good in person as you did on TV.
I gave him money before to say that. You're a very kind man.
I'm just curious if you've got enough room. You're saying this is your forever home, and I'm just raising that question.
We don't like to talk about Bruno. Yeah, so, okay, so what happens is that we moved into this new place. City Archives had been at a released space up on Cardinal Crescent, which was a fine archives, but we had run out of space to the extent where things that had been offices, we had a room we called Emma's office, because for about 6 months, we had a lady named Emma working with us. And then, but by 2020, Emma's office had, 60 linear feet of records in it, so the collection had been sort of gradually creeping out of the stacks and into people's spaces. And archives and people don't coexist very well, right? Because people don't like to work in a place where the temperature is 17 degrees all the time. At least I don't like to work in a place like that. So one of the issues we had was running out of space. So what happens is, really, you should be reading the article for all this stuff. But anyway, what happens is I get a call from my boss. Give us a wave, Sarah. And thank you for coming and joining us on this lovely Friday night. And she says, so the space comes open in the main floor of the post office building. Do you want it? And we're like, yeah, of course we do. So the main floor of the post office building had economic development, Sarita and tourism Saskatoon in it, and they were moving out. And so they stripped these two spaces all the way to the concrete, and they rebuilt them as the land department and the city archives, and a little tiny corner that IT has. And so we got to say how we wanted our space to look. We got to say what it was going to have in it. We have a beautiful HVAC system. The single most expensive piece of the move was the HVAC system, but it'll pay for itself long before its best before date in terms of efficiency and also its ability to maintain the collection. Anyway, so we have this great big room to put stuff in. And so we put stuff in and we had all this extra empty space. And then the goddamn Star Phoenix called and they said, we've sold our building. And we have all this stuff in it, and you should come and get it. And you have to come and get it right now, because if new people are moving in 2 weeks, anything that's left behind is going to be thrown out. And so I had just stopped going to the physiotherapist. And Ken and I and a couple of the ladies from records management spent the next 2 weeks frantically bagging, tagging, and palleting 50 pallets worth of stuff, which we moved to the archives. And so now now we're full again. We're not completely, but we're taking in about, I don't know, 600 or 700 or 800 boxes of city clerks and commissioners records this spring, and then we will be full. But I mean, some of this is we have collections that I should be getting rid of. We have 100-year-old financial ledgers, which are without value of any sort, and I only have them because I have room, and it hurts me to throw out something that's 100 years old. But there's no information in them that anybody would want to have. And so I get rid of those, and I'm going to free up a whole bank of shelves, right? We have some mobile shelving that Métis Nation gave us, which was very kind of them, and it's empty. So we have places and efficiencies we can do. But really what happens is, the really long answer to the short question is, this time next year we'll be full again. And then but you know what? In November of 2027, I am going to retire, and it will be somebody else's problem. Okay, the other thing is that city records, the city has gone mostly digital. And so this big intake this year, it'll be our last big intake of paper records. And so as long as I can quell my tendency to accept every collection I come across as being absolutely, I gotta have it, because all archivists are a little bit like a hoarder, we should be okay. Okay. Anybody else? All right. Well, that's what I was trying to say before was thank you very much for having me here today. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us. Everybody, how lovely to see all you people and all you familiar faces and all you folks out there in TV land. Hi, and we'll do this again next year.
Can I say something very briefly?
You can wait. I have one more.
Can we buy the edition?
Yes, absolutely. And buy. Yes, you should buy magazines. And Becky has one more thing to say.
Yes, just thank you so much for coming. And just a little note from the Heritage Society. We are now 50 years old. which. Thank you for supporting us. I just wanted to draw your attention to the fact that we are going to have a special event down on River Landing on the June the 20th. It'll be near the pump house. We're going to have storytelling, music, historical tours, some displays. So this is a work in progress. We haven't got all the details together yet, but we have booked the date. We have booked the place. Anything else to add, Wally, to that? No. Okay, that's all we've got so far. And there'll be another fall event, a more formal event. And that is another work in progress. But we really wanted to celebrate our anniversary with everybody in Saskatoon. This is your history, this is your heritage. So we invite you all to come. Mark your calendars for June the 20th.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you so much to McNally Robinson for allowing us to have our little celebration here. And thank you for hosting us. You have been very supportive of us. And let's continue that lovely relationship. Thank you. Thank you.